He laughed at a black waitress. Minutes later, he froze when he saw her speaking 10 languages, saving his $5 billion empire. Lee Myung-hee's world was ending in a chrome and glass cafe in Beverly Hills, and he was powerless to stop it. The Russian across from him, Dmitry Volkov, arms dealer, money launderer, and the key to the largest weapons-to-infrastructure conversion deal in West Coast history, was standing up, walking away. $5 billion, 3 years of negotiation, and Myung-hee's entire plan to legitimize his family's empire was disintegrating because of one critical failure. His translator had food poisoning and was currently vomiting in a hospital 20 miles away. "This is a waste of time," Dmitry said in Russian, his voice dripping with contempt as he buttoned his Brioni suit. His two bodyguards, mountains of muscle with dead eyes, moved to flank him. Myung-hee caught the tone but not the words. His own men, 3 sharp-dressed enforcers who'd killed for him without hesitation, were useless here. Violence couldn't solve this problem. "Mr. Volkov, please," Myung-hee started in English, but the Russian cut him off with a dismissive wave. "Your translator is not here. You waste my time with pantomime. I have other interested parties, people who are professional." The word was a slap. Dmitry's English was accented but clear, his disdain even clearer. "The Armenians do not make me wait with sick translators." Myung-hee's jaw clenched so tight he thought his teeth might crack. The dragon tattoo that coiled up his neck, a mark of his position, of 17 years climbing through blood and brutality to become head of the Lee family, seemed to pulse with his rising blood pressure. At 28, he was the youngest crime boss in LA's Korean underworld, known for being calculated, ruthless, and always 3 steps ahead. But right now, he was failing spectacularly. This deal wasn't just business, it was transformation. Volkov controlled a network of decommissioned Soviet weapons facilities across Eastern Europe that Myung-hee planned to convert into legitimate manufacturing plants, clean money, legal operations, a way to honor his dying father's last wish: get out of the life before it consumed the next generation. The Lee family could become legitimate players in international manufacturing, leaving behind the drugs, the protection rackets, the blood. But only if Myung-hee could close this deal. Only if he could communicate the intricate terms, the financial structures, the guarantees that required precise translation between Korean, English, and Russian. Only if, "I'm sorry, sir, but you'll need to clear this table if the meeting is over." The voice was soft, distinctly American, with an undertone of polite firmness. Myung-hee's head snapped toward the source. A waitress stood there, black, mid-20s, wearing the cafe's standard uniform of black slacks and a white button-down. She was beautiful in an understated way. Natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, minimal makeup, eyes that were warm brown and currently focused on clearing empty espresso cups with efficient grace. "We're not finished," Myung-hee said coldly in English, his accent thick when he was stressed. "I apologize, but the gentleman said he was leaving." She gestured to Dmitry, who was already halfway to the door. "And we need the table for other customers." One of Myung-hee's men, a brute named Seo-jun, stepped forward threateningly. "The boss said we're not finished." The waitress didn't flinch, just met Seo-jun's glare with remarkable calm. "Then perhaps someone should tell the gentleman who's leaving. Because from here, it looks very finished." Myung-hee felt a laugh bubble up, inappropriate, bitter, edged with hysteria he'd never let surface under normal circumstances. This waitress, this random black woman serving overpriced coffee to Beverly Hills elite, was commenting on the collapse of his entire future like she was discussing the weather. "You think this is funny?" he said in English, the words coming out harsher than intended. "You think you understand what's happening here?" She looked at him directly then, really looked at him, and Myung-hee felt something shift in his chest. Her eyes weren't mocking or afraid. They were assessing, intelligent. "I think," she said slowly, "that a Russian arms dealer just told his bodyguards in Russian that you're amateur hour and he's meeting with the Armenians tomorrow instead. I think you're losing a very important deal because your translator isn't here. And I think you're about to take your frustration out on me because I'm the only person in this room you're allowed to be angry at." The cafe went silent. Myung-hee stared at her. "You speak Russian." "Among other things." She set down her tray. "Your translator isn't coming back today, is he?" "How do you know that?" "Because you keep checking your phone every 30 seconds. with the same expression people get when they are getting bad news in installments. She paused. Also, one of your men mentioned it in Korean, something about hospitals and vomit. Myung-hee's blood went cold. You speak Korean. I speak 10 languages fluently, 11 if you count the Portuguese I'm still perfecting. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was listing items on a menu. Russian and Korean are two of them. So is Armenian, which might be relevant given what Mr. Volkov just said about his meeting tomorrow. For the first time in his adult life, Lee Myung-hee was speechless. This waitress, this woman he had been about to dismiss, had literally laughed at dismissively, spoke 10 languages, could understand every word that had been said in this catastrophic meeting, could potentially salvage everything. What's your name? The question came out more like a command. Helen, she crossed her arms. And before you ask, no, I'm not interested in whatever shady business you're conducting. I just want you to clear the table so I can do my job. Helen, Myung-hee stood, his full height making her tilt her head back slightly. He was aware of his appearance, the sharp suit, the visible tattoo, the dangerous men flanking him. Most people found him intimidating. Helen just looked mildly annoyed. I need a translator, right now, for a business negotiation worth $5 billion. I'm a waitress. I'll pay you $50,000 for 2 hours of your time. Helen's eyebrows rose. You're serious? Dmitry Volkov is walking out that door. In 30 seconds, he'll be in his car. In 5 minutes, he'll be on the phone with Armenian contacts. By tomorrow, I'll have lost the most important idol of my life. Myung-hee's voice was low, urgent. You can save this right now. $50,000, cash. Just translate. She studied him for a long moment. What kind of business requires this kind of urgency and this much money? The kind you don't want to know about. Then I'm not interested. She picked up her tray. Good luck with your Armenian problem. She turned to leave, and Myung-hee did something he hadn't done in 10 years. He begged. Wait, please. The word felt foreign in his mouth. You're right, about all of it. This is shady business, dangerous business. But I'm trying to make it legitimate. This deal, it's my way out. A way to transform everything my family does into something legal, clean. But only if I can close it, only if I can communicate. Helen paused. And if I help you close a deal that turns out to be trafficking or weapons or it's infrastructure conversion. Soviet-era weapons facilities transformed into manufacturing plants for commercial technology. Myung-hee spoke quickly, sensing her wavering. I'm taking dirty money and dirty places and making them clean. It's not noble, but it's better than what we do now. And it's the only future I can give my family that doesn't end in prison or graves. Why should I believe you? Because I'm telling you the truth when I could have lied. Because I just admitted to illegal activity to a complete stranger. Because he stopped, something raw breaking through his carefully controlled exterior. Because I'm desperate, and you're my last chance. Helen looked past him to where Dmitry was shrugging on his coat by the door, looked at Myung-hee's face, seeing something there that made her expression soften fractionally. Then she sighed. 75,000, and I want proof that this deal is what you say it is. Documentation, contracts, everything. If I find out you lied, 75,000, in full transparency. Myung-hee felt hope surge for the first time in hours. Do we have a deal? One more condition. You treat me with respect, not as hired help, not as some miracle you pulled out of thin air, but as an equal partner in this negotiation. You dismiss me again, laugh at me again, and I walk. Understood? The demand should have annoyed him. Instead, Myung-hee felt respect kindle. Understood. Then go get your Russian back. I'll give you 5 minutes. She set down her tray and pulled the elastic from her hair, letting it fall in natural curls around her shoulders. Somehow the gesture transformed her from waitress to something else entirely. Someone who belonged in boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. And Mr. Lee, don't make me regret this. Myung-hee was already moving, crossing the cafe in long strides. Mr. Volkov, he called out. Dmitry turned, annoyance clear on his weathered face. I have a translator, please. Give me 30 more minutes. I've wasted enough time. Mr. Volkov, Helen's voice cut through, speaking in flawless Russian. Mr. Lee apologizes for the delay. He understands your frustration and values your time. However, he asked for 30 minutes to present the contract modifications you requested last week regarding the Siberian facilities. He's prepared to adjust the profit-sharing structure in your favor. Dmitri froze, turned slowly to stare at Helen, who stood with perfect posture and unreadable expression. He responded in rapid Russian, something that made his bodyguards shift. Helen didn't blink. Mr. Volkov asks why he should trust that I'm competent. He says his previous experience with American translators has been poor. They miss nuance. She paused. He also just said something extremely rude about my qualifications that I'm choosing not to translate directly, but suffice it to say he's skeptical. Myung-hee felt a smile tug at his lips despite the tension. Tell him you speak 10 languages, and if he wants to test you, you're happy to translate his rude comment into Korean, Mandarin, Japanese, French, Arabic, German, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese, just to prove a point. Helen's eyes met his, something like amusement flickering there. She turned back to Dmitri and spoke in Russian, her tone professional, but with an edge that suggested she was doing exactly as Myung-hee suggested. When she finished, Dmitri's eyebrows had climbed toward his hairline. The Russian studied Helen for a long moment, then barked something that might have been a laugh. He spoke again, and Helen nodded. Mr. Volkov says he'll give you 30 minutes, but only because he's curious how a waitress in Beverly Hills learned 10 languages and why she's willing to work with ambitious criminals trying to play legitimate. She paused. His words, not mine. Tell him we're grateful for his time and his understanding. Myung-hee gestured back to the table. And Helen, tell him in Russian that we're not playing at being legitimate. We're becoming legitimate. There's a difference. As Helen translated, Myung-hee watched Dmitri's expression shift from skepticism to something like interest. The Russian returned to the table, and Myung-hee felt the weight of catastrophe lift from his shoulders. They had a chance because of a waitress who spoke 10 languages and had more courage than most of his armed enforcers. This was either the best decision of his life or the beginning of a very complicated problem. Possibly both. The negotiation that followed was unlike anything Myung-hee had experienced. Helen wasn't just translating words. She was translating intent, context, the subtle implications beneath each statement. When Dmitri made a joke in Russian, she conveyed not just the words but the humor, explaining cultural context that made Myung-hee's responses land perfectly. When Myung-hee outlined terms in Korean to his own advisors, she translated to Russian with precision that captured his exact meaning. But more than that, she became an active participant. 20 minutes into the negotiation, when Dmitri expressed concern about labor costs in the Vladivostok facility, Helen interjected smoothly. If I may, Mr. Volkov, Mr. Lee's proposal includes partnering with local trade schools to provide trained workers at reduced costs while maintaining quality. It's a model similar to what Germany implemented in former East German facilities after reunification. It addresses your cost concerns while providing community benefit. Both men stared at her. How do you know about post-reunification German manufacturing models? Myung-hee asked. I have a degree in international economics from USC, graduated top of my class. She said it without bragging, just stating fact. I'm a waitress because student loans don't pay themselves and international economics positions require connections I don't have. Why didn't you mention this before? You didn't ask. You just offered money and assumed I'd say yes. Her eyes held his. Most people see the uniform and make assumptions. Dmitri laughed, a genuine sound, and said something in Russian that made Helen's lips quirk. Mr. Volkov says he likes me because I have spine. He says Mr. Lee should hire me permanently because translators with economics degrees who aren't afraid to interrupt are rare. Tell him I'm considering it, Myung-hee said, surprising himself, because he was. This woman had walked into his disaster and turned it into possibility, had commanded respect from a Russian arms dealer through sheer competence, had shown more strategic thinking in 40 minutes than some of his advisors demonstrated in years. The deal moved forward. Complex terms about facility transfers, profit sharing, timeline for conversion from weapons manufacturing to commercial technology production. Helen translated everything flawlessly, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated her understanding of both the language and the business implications. At one point, Dmitri's legal advisor, a thin, nervous man who'd been silent until now, raised an objection in Russian about environmental liability. Helen listened, then turned to Myung-hee. He's concerned about existing contamination at the Siberian sites. wants assurance that cleanup costs won't fall on Volkov's side. It's a legitimate concern. Soviet-era facilities often have significant environmental issues. We've done environmental assessments, Myung-hee said. The costs are factored into our offer. Tell him, Bob. Actually, Helen interrupted, you might want to offer a separate escrow account for environmental remediation. It protects both parties and shows good faith. You can structure it so any unused funds are split proportionally after cleanup. It's what they did with the Chernobyl exclusion zone commercial projects. Myung-hee studied her. You're not just translating anymore. You're paying me $75,000. I'm providing value. She met his eyes without apology. But if you want me to just translate words without input, say so now. He should have been annoyed, should have put her in her place. Instead, he turned to his own legal advisor and said in Korean, set up the environmental escrow exactly as she described, and get me those assessment reports. I want them available for Volkov's team to review. Helen translated to Russian, adding context about the escrow structure that made Dmitry nod approvingly. The Russian said something lengthy, gesturing expressively, and Helen's expression shifted to surprise before settling into neutrality. Mr. Volkov agrees to the escrow structure. He also says, she paused, something flickering across her face. He says he's impressed with your choice of translator and asks if you're sleeping with me because he's considering making a competing offer for my services if we're only professional. Myung-hee felt heat rise up his neck. Tell him we only met an hour ago and her services are exclusive to this negotiation. Actually, I'm contracted for 2 hours at $75,000. After that, I'm open to competing offers. Helen's tone was professional, but her eyes held a glint of amusement. Should I translate that directly, or would you like to make a counter offer? She was testing him, pushing to see how he'd react to challenge, to the suggestion that she might work for someone else, to the implication that Dmitry had just made about their relationship. Myung-hee realized she was negotiating with him as much as she was translating, establishing her value and independence. Tell him, Myung-hee said slowly, that I'm prepared to discuss extended consulting arrangements after we conclude this meeting, at competitive rates that reflect her expertise in both language and economics. Helen's lips curved into a small smile before she turned and delivered the translation in a smooth Russian. Dmitry responded with what sounded like approval, then launched into the next contract point. They worked for another 40 minutes, hammering out details with Helen, facilitating every exchange. Myung-hee found himself watching her as much as he watched Dmitry, the way her hands moved expressively when she spoke Russian, the slight furrow between her brows when she was processing complex terms, the confident set of her shoulders that said she belonged in this room despite wearing a waitress uniform. When Dmitry finally stood and extended his hand, saying something in Russian with a broad smile, Myung-hee knew they'd done it. Helen translated, Mr. Volkov agrees to terms pending final contract review by his legal team. He'll have the paperwork ready within 1 week. He says it's been the most efficient negotiation he's had in 5 years, and he credits the translator. She paused. He also invited me to dinner. I declined. Myung-hee felt something dark and possessive flare in his chest, which was ridiculous. He'd known this woman for 2 hours. Thank him for his time and tell him my team will coordinate with his on the contract details. After Dmitry and his entourage left, Myung-hee stood in the now quiet cafe section they'd commandeered, looking at Helen. His men had stepped away to give them privacy, probably sensing the shift in energy. You just saved my life, he said quietly. I just translated a business deal. You did significantly more than that. He pulled out his phone, typed rapidly, then showed her the screen. A wire transfer authorization for $75,000. What's your banking information? Helen rattled off numbers and Myung-hee executed the transfer. His phone buzzed with confirmation. Done. $75,000 for 2 hours. That changed everything. Thank you. She checked her own phone, eyes widening slightly at the deposit notification. This is more money than I make in a year. It's less than you're worth. Myung-hee stepped closer. Helen, I meant what I said about consulting arrangements. I need someone like you, someone who understands both language and business, who can navigate negotiations, who can make you look legitimate while you transition out of crime. Her voice was gentle but direct. Mr. Lee, I helped you today because I believe people deserve second chances, and because $75,000 pays off most of my student loans. But I'm not interested in becoming part of a criminal organization, no matter how much money you're offering. What if it's not a criminal organization anymore? What if this deal is the first step toward complete legitimacy? Then you won't need someone like me. You'll hire proper consultants from firms with reputations and credentials. I need someone I can trust, someone who proved their competence under pressure, someone who— Myung-hee stopped, realizing how desperate he sounded. Have dinner with me. Tonight. Let me explain what I'm trying to build. No obligations, no pressure. Just conversation. Helen studied him for a long moment. Why? Because in 2 hours you've impressed me more than anyone has in years. Because I want to understand how a waitress with a degree in international economics speaks 10 languages and isn't using any of them. Because— he paused, something honest breaking through. Because I haven't met anyone who challenges me the way you do in longer than I can remember, and I don't want this to be the last conversation we have. That's not a business reason. No, it's not. Myung-hee held her gaze. Is that a problem? Helen's expression softened slightly. I don't date criminals. I'm not asking you to date me. I'm asking you to have dinner, to talk, to give me a chance to explain who I'm trying to become instead of judging me for who I've been. She considered this. Then, one dinner, public restaurant, I drive myself, and I leave whenever I want. And Mr. Lee, if this is some kind of power play or attempt to manipulate me into working for you, it's not. I promise. Myung-hee pulled out a business card, wrote on the back. My personal number. Text me your address. I'll pick you up at 7, or if you prefer, I'll send you the restaurant location and meet you there. I'll meet you there. Helen took the card, studying it. And I'm keeping this. If you turn out to be a serial killer, my best friend has your information and will absolutely hunt you down. Fair enough. Myung-hee smiled. A real smile, not the calculated expression he usually wore. For what it's worth, Helen, you have nothing to fear from me. You just saved my entire future. I'm not going to repay that by hurting you. We'll see. But she smiled back, small and cautious. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. She turned to leave, and Myung-hee watched her go, still wearing her waitress uniform, carrying herself like she just closed $1 million deal. Because she had. And somehow, impossibly, he wanted to see her do it again. Myung-hee spent the afternoon in his downtown office, technically a legitimate import business, actually the headquarters of the Lee family operations. His second-in-command, a sharp woman named Park Ji-soo, who'd been with the family for 15 years, found him staring out the window instead of reviewing reports. The Volkov deal? She asked in Korean. Closed, or close enough. He's reviewing final contracts. Then why do you look like someone killed your dog? Jisoo settled into the chair across from his desk. You've been working toward this for 3 years. You should be celebrating. I met someone today. The words came out before Myung-hee could stop them. Jisoo's eyebrows rose. You meet people every day. Not like this. He struggled to find words. She's a waitress with a degree in international economics who speaks 10 languages and saved the Volkov deal when everything was falling apart. She challenged me, questioned me, inserted herself into the negotiation, and made me look at my own life differently in the span of 2 hours. And you're attracted to her. Intensely. Myung-hee turned to face Jisoo, which is a problem because she made it clear she wants nothing to do with our world, said she'd help once but won't become part of a criminal organization. Smart woman. Too smart. She saw through everything in minutes, understood exactly what I'm trying to do with the Volkov deal, why it matters, what it means for going legitimate. Jisoo studied him with a calculating expression that had made her invaluable. You're going to pursue her anyway, aren't you? I asked her to dinner. She said yes, with about 20 conditions and threats. Also smart, Jisoo leaned forward. Myung-hee, listen to me. You're at a critical point. The Volkov deal is the first step, but you have enemies who don't want the Lee family going legitimate, people who profit from keeping us in the shadows. If you get involved with someone outside our world, someone who has no protection, no understanding of the dangers, you make her a target. I know. The words were heavy. But Jisoo, for the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me. Not the position, not the family name, not the reputation. Just me. She looked past all of it, and challenged me to be better. That's dangerous for both of you. Everything worth having is dangerous. Myung-hee returned to his desk, pulling out files on the Volkov deal. But you're right, I need to be careful. Need to make sure she understands what proximity to me means before this goes anywhere. And if she walks away, then she's smarter than I gave her credit for, and I'll respect her decision. But even as he said it, Myung-hee knew he was lying to himself, because something had shifted this afternoon in that cafe. Some recognition, deep and cellular, that Helen was important, that she might be the catalyst for everything he was trying to become. He just had to figure out how to show her that without getting them both killed in the process. Helen arrived at the restaurant, an upscale Korean fusion place in West Hollywood, at exactly 7 o'clock. She changed from her waitress uniform into a simple black dress that somehow made her look even more stunning. Myung-hee stood as she approached, aware of his own appearance. Designer slacks, black shirt with the collar open showing the edge of his neck tattoo. Watch that cost more than most people's cars. You're punctual, he said as she sat. You say that like you're surprised. Most people try to arrive fashionably late, make an entrance. I'm not most people, and I don't believe in games. Helen accepted a menu from the hovering waiter. I'm here because I'm curious and because $75,000 bought you the benefit of doubt. But let's be clear, I'm evaluating you right now, deciding if you're worth my time. Myung-hee felt that same spark from earlier, the thrill of being challenged. Fair enough, what do you want to know? Everything. Start with the tattoo, the dragon on your neck. What does it mean? He'd expected questions about business, about the deal, about his plans. Not this. It's the Lee family mark. Every head of the family has one. My father had a tiger. His father had a phoenix. I got the dragon when I took over 6 years ago. Took over how? My father was killed. Car bomb meant for me. I was 22 and stupid and made enemies I didn't know how to handle. He paid the price. The old guilt rose up, familiar and suffocating. I became head of the family that day, whether I was ready or not. Helen's expression softened. I'm sorry, that's a terrible way to inherit responsibility. It taught me to be careful, to think 3 steps ahead, to never underestimate anyone. He paused. Until today, when I underestimated a waitress in a Beverly Hills cafe. Why did you laugh at me? Earlier, when I asked you to clear the table. Because I was drowning and you were commenting on table turnover. It felt absurd, disconnected from the disaster I was living. Myung-hee met her eyes. I'm sorry for that. You were right earlier. I took my frustration out on you because you were safe to be angry at. It was wrong. Apology accepted. Helen studied the menu. So tell me about this transformation. Why now? Why do this deal with Volkov? Why try to go legitimate after presumably years of not being legitimate? Myung-hee ordered wine in Korean, then switched back to English. My father's last words to me were, don't let this life take everything. I didn't understand what he meant until I watched him die, until I saw what our world had cost him, his health, his peace, any chance at a normal life. He wanted better for me, for the family. And the best way to honor that is to work with the Russian arms dealers? The best way to honor that is to transform what we have into something clean. Dmitry Volkov controls assets I can convert into legitimate business. The facilities, the networks, the infrastructure, all of it can become legal operations that generate clean money. It's not perfect, but it's a path forward. At what cost? How many people will lose livelihoods when you shut down illegal operations? How many enemies will you make? Dozens? Maybe hundreds? Myung-hee didn't sugarcoat it. But the alternative is staying in a life that kills people, that destroyed my father, that's destroying me little by little. Helen, I'm 28 years old, and I've already lived longer than most people in my position. Every day is borrowed time. This deal, it's my chance to buy a different future. The wine arrived. Helen swirled her glass, studying the deep red liquid. What about the people who work for you? The ones who aren't interested in going legitimate? They can transition with us or find other arrangements. I'm not abandoning anyone, but I'm not asking permission either. He leaned forward. Tell me about you. How does someone become fluent in 10 languages while working as a waitress? 11, Helen corrected. Portuguese is getting better, and it's not that mysterious. My mother is Nigerian, father's from Senegal. I grew up speaking English, Yoruba, and French at home. Learned Spanish in school, started Arabic because I was curious about Islamic Golden Age scholarship. Added Mandarin and Korean because I worked in Koreatown during college. That's 7. What about Russian, German, Italian, Japanese, and Portuguese? Helen smiled, the first truly relaxed expression he had seen. Russian because I dated a linguistics PhD student who was obsessed with Tolstoy. German because USC had a free summer program in Berlin. Italian because I wanted to read Dante in the original. Japanese because anime got me curious about the actual language. Portuguese because it's beautiful, and I figured if I had my Spanish and French, might as well complete the Romance language set. You learn languages for fun. I learned languages because each one is a doorway into a different way of thinking, a different culture, a different worldview. Her eyes lit up. Every language changes how you process reality. Russian has different words for shades of blue that English doesn't. Korean has hierarchy built into verb conjugations. Arabic poetry works in ways that don't translate. Learning languages means learning to see the world through multiple lenses simultaneously. Myung-hee found himself leaning in, captivated. And the economics degree? Because understanding how money moves explains how power moves. I wanted to understand global systems, trade networks, how wealth gets created and distributed. It fascinated me. She paused. Still does, which is why I recognize what you're trying to do with Volkov. Converting illegal assets to legitimate operations is textbook economic transition theory. Then why are you working at a cafe? Because I'm a black woman without connections in a field dominated by white men with family networks. Because student loans don't care about my GPA. Because after graduation, the choice was take what I could get or starve while sending out applications to places that wouldn't hire me anyway. No bitterness, just pragmatism. The cafe pays rent and lets me study languages in my downtime. It's not what I planned, but it works. You deserve better. I deserve what I earn, and I'm not interested in handouts or pity. Helen's voice sharpened. If you're thinking about offering me a job out of guilt or attraction or some savior complex, I'm thinking about offering you because you're the most competent person I've met in years, and I'd be an idiot not to utilize that competence. Myung-hee kept his tone level. But you're right, we barely know each other, and mixing business with whatever this is, he gestured between them, would be complicated. So what is this? Helen challenged. Why am I really here? Myung-hee set down his wine glass. Honestly, because I can't stop thinking about you. Because in 2 hours, you challenged every assumption I had about myself and my world. Because when you walked away from that cafe, I realized I didn't want you to disappear. And because he stopped, surprised by his own honesty. Because I think you might be exactly what I need to become the person I'm trying to be. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone you just met. I know, which is why I'm not asking for anything except your time, your conversation, your honesty, which you seem incapable of withholding anyway. A slight smile. Get to know me. Let me get to know you. See if this, whatever this is, has potential before we make it more complicated. Helen was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those intelligent brown eyes. Okay, but ground rules. 1. You're honest with me about everything. Your business, your world, the risks. I'm not a child who needs protection from reality. 2. You respect my boundaries. I say no, you accept it. I say stop, you stop. 3. You understand that I might walk away at any point, and if I do, you let me go. No stalking, no manipulation, no using your resources to track me down. Agreed on all counts. Good. She picked up her menu. Now, can we actually order food? I'm starving, and that $75,000 should at least buy me a good meal. Myung-hee laughed, genuine, unguarded laughter that surprised him with its ease. Order whatever you want. I'm buying. Consider it part of the consulting fee. They ordered, Helen choosing dishes with confidence, occasionally commenting on ingredients in Korean to the surprised waiter, who responded with obvious delight at her fluency. Myung-hee watched the exchange, fascinated by how easily she shifted between languages, how her entire demeanor changed with each one. In English, she was measured, guarded. In Korean, there was a warmth, a playfulness that suggested depths he hadn't seen yet. You enjoy that, he observed after the waiter left. Language switching. It's like being multiple people at once. Each language unlocks different parts of my personality. She sipped her wine. In French, I'm more philosophical. In Spanish, more passionate. In Russian, more blunt. Languages aren't just communication tools, they're identity frameworks. What about Korean? Who are you in Korean? Helen considered this. Respectful but playful. Korean's hierarchy system forces you to think about relationships constantly, how you address people, what verb forms you use. It makes you aware of social dynamics in ways English doesn't. I like that awareness. It feels honest. Most people find the hierarchy oppressive. Most people don't understand that structure can be freeing. When you know the rules, you know how to navigate them, or break them intentionally. Her eyes met his. You understand that? Your whole world is structured hierarchy. Yes, though I'm trying to build something different. Are you, or are you just trying to legitimize the same hierarchy with legal paperwork? The question cut deep because Helen had identified the exact fear that kept Myung-hee awake at night. I don't know, he admitted. I want to believe I can transform everything, create something new. But maybe you're right. Maybe I'm just putting a prettier face on the same system. That's not necessarily a failure. Sometimes evolution is better than revolution. Helen leaned forward. The Volkov deal, you're not dismantling his weapons network, you're repurposing it. That's strategic transformation, not moral redemption. And maybe that's okay. Maybe trying to be completely pure is less effective than being pragmatically better. You sound like you've thought about this before. I wrote my thesis on economic transitions in post-Soviet states. The most successful transformations weren't the ones that tried to destroy everything and rebuild from scratch. They were the ones that repurposed existing infrastructure and networks, gradual change, strategic repositioning. She paused. You're doing the organized crime equivalent of that. It's actually smart. High praise from someone who said she wanted nothing to do with criminal organizations. I said I wouldn't become part of one. That doesn't mean I can't appreciate the strategic elegance of what you're attempting. Helen's expression turned serious. But Myung-hee, you need to understand something. Transitions are dangerous. The in-between space when you're neither fully one thing nor the other, that's when you're most vulnerable. Your enemies in the criminal world will see you as a traitor. Potential partners in the legitimate world will see you as too dirty to touch. You're going to be alone for a while. I know. The weight of it pressed down on him. That's why I need people I can trust. People who understand both worlds. People like, don't. Helen's hand came up. Don't finish that sentence. We're getting to know each other, remember? Not recruiting me for your transition team. Fair enough. But Myung-hee couldn't shake the feeling that Helen was exactly what he needed. Someone positioned outside his world but capable of understanding it. Someone with no loyalty to the old hacks but appreciation for strategic reality. Someone who could see him clearly without the distortion of fear or obligation. The food arrived and they ate while talking about everything except business. Helen told him about growing up in a multilingual household where dinner conversations happened in 3 languages simultaneously. About her mother's insistence that education was the pathway to freedom. Her father's quieter belief that understanding people mattered more than understanding systems. About losing her younger brother to gang violence when she was 19, and how it had shaped her understanding of why people chose criminal paths. That's why you helped me today, Myung-hee said quietly. Because you understand. I understand that people make choices within limited options, that survival sometimes requires compromises, that the world isn't cleanly divided into good and evil. Helen's eyes held grief. My brother was 15, got recruited by a local gang because it was the only place he felt like he belonged, where people protected him instead of seeing him as a threat. He died 6 months later in a drive-by. Wrong place, wrong colors, wrong moment. I'm sorry. Me too, every day. She set down her chopsticks. But it taught me something. Organizations like yours, they exist because people need structure, protection, belonging. You can't just eliminate them without addressing those underlying needs. So if you're going to transition out, you need to provide alternatives. Ways for people to earn, to have status, to feel secure. Otherwise, you're just creating a vacuum that someone else will fill. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. The manufacturing plants, the legitimate businesses, they're not just money laundering. They're employment, purpose, a different path. Then you might actually pull this off. Helen smiled slightly. Or you might get killed trying. It's honestly 50-50. Encouraging. Honest, which is what you asked for. They finished dinner as the restaurant filled with late evening crowds. Myung-hee found himself reluctant for the night to end, aware that once Helen left, the spell of this conversation would break. She'd return to her life, he'd return to his, and the chasm between their worlds would reassert itself. "Walk with me," he said as they left the restaurant, "just for a few blocks." Helen studied him, then nodded. They walked through West Hollywood, the evening warm and clear. Myung-hee was hyper-aware of her beside him, the way she moved with quiet confidence, how her eyes tracked their surroundings without obvious surveillance, the careful distance she maintained. His security team followed at a discreet distance, invisible to most people, but undoubtedly obvious to Helen. "Do they ever get a night off?" she asked, nodding toward where his men shadowed them. "Not when I'm with someone who could be a target." "I'm not with you. We had dinner. That doesn't make me part of your world." "Helen, the moment you translated for me and Volkov, you became part of my world, at least in the eyes of anyone watching." Myung-hee stopped walking, turning to face her. "I should have explained this before dinner. Should have warned you. But the truth is, being seen with me makes you noticeable to people who track my movements. And some of those people won't care that you're uninvolved. They'll just see potential leverage." Helen's expression hardened. "You're saying I'm in danger because I helped you." "I'm saying you might be, depending on who was watching, who reported back, how seriously they take the Volkov deal." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "This is why I wanted to be honest with you. Why I need you to understand what proximity to me means." "So what are you suggesting? That I need protection? That I should hide? Change my life because you have enemies?" "I'm suggesting that you be careful, aware, and that if you're serious about continuing to see me, in any capacity, we need to establish security protocols." "This is insane." But Helen wasn't running, wasn't pulling away, just processing, thinking through implications with that sharp analytical mind. "How long? How long before I stop being interesting to your enemies?" "If the Volkov deal closes and nothing happens, probably a few weeks. If something goes wrong, longer." Myung-hee stepped closer. "But Helen, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I have resources, people, ways to keep you safe even if you decide you never want to see me again." "That's not your decision to make." "You're right, it's not. But I'm making it anyway because I brought you into this situation and I take responsibility for that." They stared at each other, the space between them charged with tension and unresolved questions. Finally, Helen sighed. "Okay, tell me what I need to know, what I need to watch for, how to be careful without becoming paranoid." Myung-hee spent the next 10 minutes explaining basics, how to notice surveillance, what patterns to watch for, emergency numbers to call, how to vary her routes and routines. Helen listened with total focus, asking clarifying questions, memorizing details. When he finished, she pulled out her phone. "I'm texting my address to your number. Not because I want you showing up uninvited, but because if something happens, I want someone to know where to look." She met his eyes. "And Myung-hee, if anyone gets hurt because of me being associated with you, including you, I'm done, immediately, permanently. Understood?" "Understood." He saved the address, then sent her a contact. "That's Jisoo, my second in command. She'll be your point person for security concerns. She's trustworthy, competent, and will not bullshit you about risks." "Good." Helen started walking back toward the restaurant parking lot where her car waited. This was complicated. The dinner, the conversation, the reality check about danger. "I don't know what to do with any of it." "You don't have to decide tonight. Just..." Myung-hee caught her hand, stopping him. "Just don't disappear. Give this a chance. Give us a chance, whatever us might mean." Helen looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "You're very intense. Has anyone told you that?" "Frequently, usually right before they run away." "I'm not running, but I'm not promising anything either." She squeezed his hand once, then let go. "Call me. If you're serious about this, about getting to know each other, about being honest, then call me. We'll figure out if there's something here worth the complications." She walked to her car, an older Honda that had seen better years, and drove away. Myung-hee watched until her taillights disappeared, then turned to find Jisoo materializing from the shadows. Well, his second asked in Korean, she's extraordinary, intelligent, brave, completely unwilling to be impressed by money or power. Myung-hee smiled despite the complications swirling in his mind. And she sees right through me, which is either going to save me or destroy me. My money's on both. Jisoo fell into step beside him. I ran background on her after you mentioned her earlier. Helen Adeyemi, 26, graduated USC with honors, no criminal record, financially struggling but managing, no close criminal associations. She's exactly what she appears to be, someone who ended up in the wrong place at the right time. Or the right place at the right time. Depends on your perspective. Jisoo's expression turned serious. Myung-hee, I've already had 3 reports of people be asking questions about her. Local crew members wondering who the black woman was. Someone from the Russian side asking if she's permanent. Word is spreading. A sign of protection detail. Discreet but effective. I don't want her knowing unless necessary, but I want her safe. Already done, but boss, you need to be careful here. She's a civilian. Getting involved with her while we're in transition is dangerous for both of you. I know, but Jisoo, for the first time since my father died, I felt like someone saw me as more than the position, more than the family name. She looked at me and saw a person trying to be better, and she challenged me to actually do it. Myung-hee's voice was quiet. I can't let that go. I won't. Then protect her properly, because if your enemies figure out how much she's starting to mean to you, they won't hesitate to use her as leverage. Let them try. The words came out cold, dangerous. Anyone who touches her will learn exactly why I'm head of this family. Helen drove home with her mind spinning. The dinner had been good, better than good. Myung-hee was intelligent, surprisingly vulnerable, clearly trying to become something different than his past dictated, and the chemistry between them was undeniable. Every time their eyes met, every accidentally brush of hands, every shared smile had sent electricity through her. But the reality was stark. He was a crime boss trying to go legitimate, which meant he had enemies, danger, complications that most people never imagined. Getting involved with him meant accepting risk, surveillance, the constant awareness that someone might try to hurt her, to hurt him. Was he worth that risk? Helen honestly didn't know. But as she parked outside her small apartment in Inglewood and checked her phone to find a text from an unknown number. This is Jisoo. Myung-hee gave me your contact. If you need anything or notice anything unusual, call me immediately. Day or night. She realized the choice might already be made. She was already involved, already visible to whatever network tracked Myung-hee's movements. The question now wasn't whether to get involved, but how to navigate being involved while maintaining her independence and safety. Helen entered her apartment, locked the door, and immediately opened her laptop. If she was going to be part of this situation, she needed information. She spent the next 3 hours researching everything she could find about the Lee family, Korean organized crime in Los Angeles, recent transitions from criminal to legitimate operations in other organizations worldwide. What she found was sobering. The Lee family controlled significant territory in LA's Koreatown and surrounding areas. They had fingers in gambling, protection, smuggling, and various other enterprises. But they also had legitimate businesses. Import companies, real estate holdings, restaurants. Myung-hee's father had been building toward legitimacy before his death, which suggested this transition wasn't just Myung-hee's vision, but a continuation of a longer plan. The complications were real. Rival organizations, internal resistance from people invested in criminal operations, law enforcement attention during transitions. The mortality rate for crime bosses attempting to go legitimate was disturbingly high. Myung-hee hadn't been exaggerating when he said every day was borrowed time. But there were success stories too. Organizations that had successfully transitioned, becoming legitimate business empires while maintaining their protective networks and community standing. It was possible, just incredibly difficult and dangerous. Helen's phone buzzed, a text from Myung-hee. Thank you for tonight, for listening, for honesty, for giving this a chance. Sleep well. You're safe. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, thank you for dinner and for being honest about the risks. I'm still processing everything. But I'm not running yet. His response was immediate, yet is all I'm asking for. Good night, Helen. She set down her phone and looked around her small apartment. The secondhand furniture, the stacks of language books, the quiet life she'd built from nothing but determination and student loans. Myung-hee had offered to disrupt all of it, to pull her into a world of danger and complexity and possibility. The smart choice was to walk away, to appreciate the $75,000, enjoy the memory of one interesting dinner, and return to her safe, predictable life. But Helen had never been particularly interested in smart choices. She'd learned 10 languages because they fascinated her, pursued a degree in international economics, despite knowing the job market was terrible for people like her, jumped into freezing water to save her brother, even though she couldn't swim well. She made choices based on what mattered, not what was safe. And something about Myung-hee mattered. The way he'd been honest about his world, the vulnerability beneath his dangerous exterior, the genuine desire to become something better. He was trying to transform from criminal to legitimate businessman, which was its own kind of linguistic transition, learning a new language of legality, navigating different hierarchies, becoming fluent in a world he had only observed from outside. It was the kind of challenge Helen understood intimately, the kind she couldn't resist being part of. She pulled out her phone again and scrolled to Jisoo's contact. Typed, "This is Helen. I have questions about security protocols and what I'm actually dealing with. Can we meet tomorrow?" The response came within a minute. "Yes, coffee shop near USC campus, 10 a.m. I'll explain everything you need to know." "I'll be there." Helen set down her phone and smiled despite the complications spiraling around her. She jumped into deep water today when she agreed to translate that meeting. Might as well learn to swim properly instead of just flailing at the surface. Tomorrow she'd meet with Jisoo and learn exactly what she'd gotten herself into. Tomorrow she'd make informed decisions about what came next. Tonight, she just let herself remember the way Myung-hee had looked at her across the dinner table, like she was something precious and dangerous all at once, like she might be exactly what he needed to become the person he was trying to be. And maybe, impossibly, he was exactly what she needed too. Someone who saw her languages not as party tricks, but as doorways into different ways of being. Someone who valued her mind as much as her appearance. Someone who was honest about his darkness while reaching for light. It was crazy, complicated, potentially catastrophic. But as Helen fell asleep with her research still glowing on her laptop screen, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stumbled into exactly the kind of story she'd spent her whole life preparing for. One that required every language she spoke, every skill she'd developed, every ounce of courage she possessed. The story of a waitress and a crime boss, a translator and a transition. Two people from different worlds learning to speak the same language of transformation. And maybe, just maybe, love.